Hey everybody, this is Weston from Bell Bro's TCG, bringing you a Yu-Gi-Oh! Edison Format deck tech. This is Disaster Dragons. Not sure why they call it that, but shout out to Richard Clark for inventing it. This is a deck that had some success at high-level Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments back in the day, but it was a common fixture of local tournaments during Edison Format. Really powerful deck, really fun to play. Let's get right into it. So the core of Disaster Dragons is this guy right here, Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, or Red MD, as we call him for short. Red MD has been on and off the ban list over the course of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. In Edison Format, he is at 3. And we can special summon this card by banishing a face-up dragon monster we control. And then once per turn, we can special summon one dragon monster from our hand or graveyard, except Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. And there's no parameters on what that dragon monster can be, so we can cheat in big dragons, we can bring back dragons that have been destroyed before. He's a really powerful sort of one-card engine that enables this deck to work. We also have Red Eyes Wyvern here to support Red MD. Wyvern can banish itself from the graveyard to special summon a Red MD from the graveyard. So if both of these cards are in the graveyard and we don't normal summon, during the end phase, we can get back Red MD. So this is sort of a package, the Red Eyes package. We also have a Masked Dragon toolbox in this deck. Recruiters are still very good in Edison Format. Cards like Pyramid Turtle and Nova Summoner see a lot of play. Masked Dragon is right up there with those guys. So when Masked Dragon dies, we can special summon either a nice Enabler or a Silver Bullet type card from our deck. And our Masked Dragon package is 2 Totem Dragons, which is basically a Dragon Treeborn Frog, a Debris Dragon, which is a tuner that enables us to get into our extra deck, and an Exploder Dragon, which is sort of like a Dragon Exiled Force. This is not really a Debris Dragon deck. We only have one Debris Dragon target in the main deck, which is Totem Dragon. But Debris Dragon's still a nice tuner for us to have access to, and there's a couple different things we can go to in the extra deck with him. So those are sort of 2 of our dragon packages, and then we have really what I think is the reason to play this deck, which is all of these really powerful monsters, dragon monsters that can kind of take control of the game by themselves. So first of all, we have Koakimaru Drago, which is a 1900 beater, normal summonable, that says neither player can special summon light or dark monsters. Obviously, this kind of hurts us a little bit, because then we can't special summon Red MD if we have a Drago on the field, but it's going to hurt our opponents a lot more. A lot of Edison decks lean heavily into light and dark monsters, heavily into special summoning those, think like Blackwing. And Koakimaru Drago can just straight up shut down a lot of decks in the format. They have to deal with this card before they can really get their engine humming. The next card is Prime Material Dragon. This is a super powerful card. It's a tribute monster, and it's never really gotten any support, so it's kind of been stuck in jank decks, but I think in a vacuum, this is a super powerful card. During either player's turn, when a card or effect is activated that would destroy a monster on the field, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. That is not once per turn. So Prime Material Dragon can negate as many things per turn as we have cards in hand if we want to. Super powerful against a lot of the traps in this format, a lot of destruction monster effects in this format that could theoretically out Red MD, can't because of Prime Material Dragon. So it's also a really powerful monster for our end board. And then finally we have Light and Darkness Dragon, which is basically upgraded Appaloosa. We can't summon Light and Darkness Dragon off Red MD, but we can use Totem Dragon as 2 tributes for dragon monsters. So we can bring Totem Dragon back on our standby and sacrifice it for Light and Darkness Dragon on our main phase. Light and Darkness Dragon just negates everything 5 times until it doesn't have enough attack left to negate anything anymore. Basically, this card says when it's normal summoned, your opponent skips their next 2 turns a lot of the time, because they're just going to have to use all their resources for a very long time trying to out this card. that does it for the monsters. Getting into the spells, first and foremost, we've got Future Fusion. Future Fusion is an absurdly broken card, and I think Disaster Dragons is probably the deck that's best able to make use of it. Basically, we activate it, we reveal a fusion monster, and then we send the materials for that monster from our deck to the graveyard. The fusion monster we're going to reveal every time is 5-headed dragon, and that's going to allow us to send 5 dragon monsters from the deck to the graveyard. Basically, painful choice in a fusion spell here. We're usually going to send some combination of Red MD, Red Eyes Wyvern, and Totem Dragon. And once those are in the graveyard, they all have graveyard effects that allow them to come back or make them useful in some other way. So Future Fusion really gets our deck humming. We want to see this every game. We're running 2 Gold Sarks to make sure that we see it every game. But ask anybody who plays Dragons in Edison format, you're just going to open this card. We all do. Nobody really knows why, but it's always there. Burial from a Different Dimension is also a nice tech card for us. We're banishing a lot of stuff with Wyvern, Totem Dragon. So in grindy games, Burial from a Different Dimension can really help give us a second wind to go over the top. We're running a bunch of spell and trap removal, MST, Giant Trunade, Heavy Storm, Cold Wave. These help us push for our OTKs. We're running a ton of high attack dragon monsters, like Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, Prime Material Dragon. It's very easy for us to get an OTK on board, and these cards help ensure that we are able to get that OTK into our opponent's face. Cold Wave is the one, it's probably the strongest of these cards, but it's also the one that is a little bit of a non-bow in our deck with Future Fusion. So if you open Future Fusion and Cold Wave, you're probably going to want to activate the Future Fusion first. If you activate the Cold Wave, you won't be able to until the end of your next turn. Most of the rest of the cards in the deck are staples. We got Triple Book of Moon, a single Brain Control, 1 Call of the Haunted, 1 Solemn Judgment, 1 Mirror Force, 1 Torrential Tribute, 1 Trap Dust Shoot, double Bottomless Trap Hole, and then Starlight Road as a nasty surprise for anybody who wants to Heavy Storm us. Moving into the side deck, we've got double Cyber Dragons for Machina and Gadget matchups. These allow us to contact fuse our whole opponent's board into a Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon. We've got My Body as a Shield for Black Wings and Light Sworns mostly. Really good against Icarus Attack, Judgment Dragons, anything that's going to destroy one or more monsters on the field. We got Rivalry of Warlords for Dandy Warrior, Flamevel, really any kind of synchro pile deck. This card is just absurd against those decks. It basically shuts them out from playing the game. Doesn't matter at all to us since every monster in our deck is a dragon type monster. Some decks in the format it's not good against fairies, zombies, but for the most part, in matchups where it's good, Rivalry of Warlords is an absolute blowout. We got DD Crow. This is for the mirror match. We are a graveyard deck. DD Crow is very good against us, and if we're playing a Dragons deck, we want to side in DD Crow. It's also really good against Vayu Turbo, zombies, any graveyard deck in the format. Pulling the Rug is for Monarchs. Royal Oppression is for opponents who are jerks. I hate Royal Oppression. I think it's maybe the worst designed Yu-Gi-Oh card of all time, but it's really hard to turn down a free win out of the sideboard, and a lot of times that's what Royal Oppression is. You just do your thing, flip Royal Oppression, and the opponent can't do anything at all. Keep in mind, though, that Royal Oppression does have some weird interactions with some cards in Edison format. Vayu, for one thing. Don't try to Royal Oppression of Vayu. Stamping Destruction rounds out the side deck. This is just more spell and trap removal with a little bit of upside. We will always control a dragon monster, and when we're playing back row decks, sometimes it's nice to bring in a little bit more spell and trap removal. You could also consider something like Death Tornado for this slot, or really whatever you want. I think these 2 spots in the side deck are pretty open. Moving on to the extra, we got 5-headed dragon. This is our Future Fusion target. Most of the time, we don't even care if we get the 5-headed dragon out. We just want the Future Fusion to send the cards from our deck. But if 5-headed dragon does resolve, it can win the game on its own. It's got 5,000 attack. Fortress Dragon goes with our Cyber Dragons. Iron Chain Dragon, Exploder Dragon Wing, Black Rose Dragon, Ancient Fairy Dragon, and Trident Dragion are the cards that we can summon with our Debris Dragon. We can't make any level 8 dragons because of the way that Debris Dragon works. But these are solid cards. Obviously, you probably know Bird and AFD. Iron Chain Dragon is just the only level 6 dragon synchro monster in this format. Exploder Dragon Wing kind of works has like a Ring of Destruction type effect almost. Really good for outing like soft Frog Lock, where they got a dupe frog and a substitute. And then Trident Dragion can OTK on its own under the right circumstances. Stardust Dragon for Starlight Road, another Stardust Dragon for Brain Control, and then also for Brain Control we've got Cataster, Brionic, Goyo, Red Dragon Archfiend, and Colossal Fighter. If I had to give the pros and the cons of this deck, or really Disaster Dragon and Dragon decks in Edison format in general, I'd say pros, number 1, the deck is pretty linear. It's not really that difficult to pilot, and it's pretty beginner friendly. We're really only running a few different engines, the Red Eye stuff, the Mass Dragon stuff, the Future Fusion engine, and most of the rest of the deck is staples, or these kind of cards that can sort of control the game on their own. There's not that many different lines in the deck compared to maybe like a Dandy Warrior deck or some of the other popular decks in Edison format. So it's good for beginners. It's good for people who are looking to learn the format. It's just fun to beat face with dragons, especially when you're going up against these super complicated long-turn decks. Pro number 2, this deck is really high power. It's very capable of putting out OTKs and practically unbreakable boards, almost like a modern advanced format Yu-Gi-Oh deck. You got tons of high attack cards in the main deck and the extra deck. OTKs are easily happening most turns with the right setup. You have tons of spell trap removal to push through your OTKs. And you've got all these floodgates and negates on bodies. Like in an Edison format where a lot of decks are looking to end on one extra deck monster, I mean, even if that monster has a negate effect, like if it's once per turn, we're laughing at it. We've got all these super powerful monsters that aren't once per turn or that are floodgates. We can establish some really powerful and really difficult to break boards. And then pro number 3, there's a ton of flex spots in the deck. The core of the deck is really small. It's basically 3 Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, 3 Red Eyes Wyvern, Future Fusion. Almost everything else in the deck is a flex spot. You can go so many different directions with dragons in Edison format. You could go, really lean into the extra deck synchro monsters, triple Debris Dragon. You could even run a lot of non-dragon cards, like take out the Koakibiru Dragos and the Totem Dragons that really need to be in an all-dragon deck, and you can run all kinds of, just synchro staples in Edison format in conjunction with the dragon engines, and you'll have a really good deck. You could go like a deep draw direction with it, with Cards of Consonance, Whitestone Legend, Blue Eyes, Trade In. You could even go a chaos direction with it, really lean into the light and darks, and run some of the chaos cards and dad, almost like, chaos dragons that would come out some years after Edison format. As for the cons of the deck, number 1, it's linear. It's a pro and a con. People who have played against this deck before are going to know what you're up to. They're going to know what you're trying to do, and they're probably going to have some idea of how to play around it. They're going to understand what your high value cards are. They're going to understand what the choke points in your turn are. If you've played against this deck once, you've played against it 1,000 times, and the more experienced your opponent is, the more likely they are, the more likely it is they're going to be able to play around it. And con number 2, this deck is kind of a glass cannon. It is really powerful if it is able to combo off uninterrupted, but it's pretty easy to interrupt. DD Crow, like I said in the mirror, it can torpedo our whole turn. We have a lot of really high value graveyard targets that are nice to exile with DD Crow. MST can effectively negate a Future Fusion, which is really funny to me, since Future Fusion is a continuous trap card. If somebody MSTs it when it's activated, we don't get to resolve any of its effect. So it's sort of things like that make the deck sort of easy to interrupt and turn it into kind of a glass cannon. Overall, though, I think the deck has more pros than cons. It's a dragon deck, you know? If you play Yu-Gi-Oh, you gotta love dragons, right? And like I said, you can even run a version of this deck that runs Blue Eyes White Dragon. Like, there's just a certain appeal to it, I think, to playing this kind of underdogish deck. A lot of these nostalgic cards, operating on a different axis than a lot of Edison Format decks, and getting to play Edison Format, which is a fantastic format. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the deck tech, and thanks for joining us on Bell Bros TCG.